The most explosive question surrounding Harry and Meghan's return to Britain is no longer whether they are coming home, it is why they suddenly need Britain again, and whether the calendar, not reconciliation, is actually controlling this dramatic royal comeback.
Lady Colin Campbell, what on earth is going on? Just weeks after you revealed to the world this close, shall we say, friendship that Prince Harry had developed with a certain young lady in Montecito, they claim to be packing their bags.
This whole situation is very interesting because once Meghan and those children are back in the United Kingdom, that means that the marital home is in the United Kingdom. That means that Harry is in a far stronger position in terms of any future place where, in the event of a permanent separation or divorce.
Harry and Meghan are back in Britain this month. Vans booked, school places taken, the lot. And on Thursday night, a woman who had spent 8 days watching a calendar finally said it out loud. Lady Colin Campbell says he is not coming home. She says he is running. Before we get to what he is running from, look at how the country he picked over this one waved him off. The New York Post gave it the front page. Our long national nightmare is over. Harry and Meghan returning to the UK after failing to take the colonies. That opening alone changes the temperature of this entire story, because this is not being presented as a warm royal reconciliation. It is being framed as an emergency return, a calculated retreat, a move arriving after 6 extraordinary years in which Harry and Meghan repeatedly insisted Britain was dangerous, hostile, unbearable, and fundamentally incompatible with the life they wanted. Yet now the vans are booked, school places are apparently taken, and the family is preparing to return. And then came the ridicule.
They really hate each other now, and they cannot hide it anymore.
She was the villain.
How was she dangerous?
Because of the need for her to rehabilitate her image.
Harry was not in love with Meghan Markle.
He was madly in love. The veil is now lifting.
An American comic went one better. We finally found a deportation he said that all Americans agree on. That is the send-off. No farewell tour, no thank you note, a shrug and a street party. And over here, nobody is even pretending anymore. Neil Sean went on American television and gave the whole 6-year experiment 2 words: broke and busted. Tom Bauer, who has spent years on these two, says Harry lives in a fantasy world and called him a blunderbuss. His prediction is that the fall of the Sussexes will be the great story, and there is only one way it goes.
He took Meghan and the kids. They came over privately to see the king a few weeks ago. When she said, "I'll never set foot in this country again," and when she said the royal family is racist, and when she slagged off almost every bit of the institution, why does she still want her daughter and son to be a prince and princess then? Part of a racist institution.
Angela 11 says they are horrendous, that it is ruthless and it is war, and that they are lying all the way through. Robert Jobson has a name for it now. We had Mexit. This, he says, is Regrets-it. And his sums on why Harry would grab a small royal job if one were offered are brutally simple. He would take it, said Jobson. And the reason is obvious. It beats selling jam. I'll go further than any of them. I wouldn't have the pair of them back in this country at all. The brass neck of it. 6 years telling the world we are racist. And now the vans are booked. And that is where the title becomes even more provocative, because the royal question is no longer simply about Harry returning. It is about what happens to the royal structure when Harry comes back. Who stands beside whom, who gets pushed forward, and whether the balcony itself becomes a visual declaration of who still belongs at the center of the monarchy. The possibility of James occupying space where Harry once stood turns a family dispute into something far more symbolic.
Harry is only coming back because he's got nothing to do in California. He's coming back because he's trying desperately to somehow rebuild a life here. It isn't going to work. Not only has he got nowhere to live, but these charities, the Well Child, it's all that's piffling. It's nothing in terms of the real charities. And in Invictus, he's got no importance. He can do everything on the telephone or on the Zoom. He doesn't need to be back. No, this is Harry desperately trying to find and build a new life in Britain.
So that is the room these two are walking into. Nobody is arguing about whether they should come. The argument is about why, which brings us back to Lady C. Her account runs like this. She was fed information from the 12th of August and kept quiet, and the last update landed the morning she went on air. On the 11th of August, she was told there was a meeting with federal authorities in America going through paperwork Harry submitted around 2021 for his entry to the United States. That claim, however dramatic, remains a claim. No document was named. named, no official was named, nobody was charged with anything. But the timing is precisely what makes the story combustible, because Lady Colin Campbell says she waited before speaking, and suddenly the dates begin to matter.
Meghan's jam failed to sell out. Her season 2 of her cooking show was an absolute disaster. And this man, I think, will be asking Dad for a little bit more money very, very quickly. I only see bad things on the horizon, and I think also he's trying to get back in with the king because he knows he'll never be able to get back in with William.
If they didn't jump, he was going to be pushed, and they could not afford the embarrassment of him possibly being arrested. And before anyone says that is just a commentator talking, wait, she sat on it for 8 days before she breathed the word of it, and she came with dates. It is her claim on her show and her words. No document named, no official named, nobody charged with the thing. Now comes the contradiction that refuses to disappear. If Harry had been planning a return for months, why describe the situation as an 8-day emergency? And if this really was an emergency, why were school arrangements and housing preparations apparently already moving into place? Now, look at her clock. Nothing at all. On the 10th, a meeting with federal officers on the 11th, a family pact, and the whole thing in 2 national newspapers by the 20th. 8 or 9 days, as she put it. Here is the hole in it, and I would rather point out it myself than have you find it in the comments. On that same program, that same night, the host mentioned Tom Sykes has a chapter saying Harry had been planning this move for months. Sykes says a friend told him in the spring that Harry was already house hunting. Months of planning and 8 days of panic cannot both be true. And this is where the money trail suddenly becomes impossible to ignore, because while the public was being told about family, children, cousins, and a possible return to Britain, another clock had been ticking quietly in the background, the tax clock. Nimish Shaw, chief executive of Blick Rothenberg, described the timing as immaculate, pointing directly toward the 6 complete tax years that had passed since Harry and Meghan left Britain in 2020. That does not prove motive, but it creates a striking coincidence. They left just before the tax year ended, and the 6th full tax year finished this April. Then, months later, the return appears. 6 years, 1 calendar, 1 remarkably convenient date. Suddenly, the word homecoming starts sounding very different. The security question makes the situation even more explosive. Tom Sykes examined the court material surrounding Harry's protection and pointed to something far less mysterious than the endless arguments surrounding it. Harry is outside the group, automatically entitled to the level of protection he wants, and living outside the United Kingdom is part of the wider picture. Then comes the potential loophole. Return to Britain, take on even a minor royal role, and suddenly the entire calculation could change. 1 small position, 1 charity, 1 official connection, and the security conversation could be transformed. The sums being discussed are enormous. Millions in private security costs could potentially become a different kind of expense if Harry somehow returned to the working royal orbit. And that is why the suggestion of a small royal role matters so much. It is not necessarily about prestige. It could be about access, protection, status, and money. But the palace has already placed a warning sign directly across that doorway. The message has been that Harry and Meghan remain private individuals and non-working royals. No half-in, half-out arrangement, no effortless restoration of their former position. Yet, the door appears to remain slightly open for Harry to speak privately with his father about any future role. That tiny distinction is where the intrigue lives. Because if Harry returns, the question becomes whether he returns as a son, a private citizen, or something dangerously close to a working royal again. And then there is the human cost. Di Davies, who once ran Royal Protection Command, reportedly described the situation as a stunning reversal after years of Harry insisting Britain was unsafe for Meghan and the children. The contradiction is almost impossible to miss. A country supposedly too dangerous for the family suddenly becomes suitable enough for homes, schools, and a return. Davies also raised concerns about the enormous security implications and the possibility that officials had known more about the preparations than the public was being told. The palace suggestion that everything emerged suddenly only adds another layer of suspicion. Then comes the family question. Page 6 reportedly framed the return around Harry and Meghan wanting greater closeness with the king and relationships between their children and their cousins. But critics immediately ask, Which relationships exactly? After years of distance, only limited meetings, and barely any visible family reconciliation, why suddenly make the children the centerpiece of the explanation? That is why Robert Jobson's comments about Harry seeing his father only a handful of times and seeing the grandchildren even less become so damaging. The emotional language surrounding the children collides with the history, and now the royal stage itself becomes the ultimate test. If Harry appears at a major royal occasion, where does he stand? If James occupies the position Harry once expected to occupy, what does that say? If Catherine remains beside William while Harry is somewhere outside the central formation, the image could speak louder than any statement from the palace. Because this return may not restore Harry's old place, it may reveal just how completely that place has changed. That is the real mystery hanging over this homecoming. Harry and Meghan may be returning to Britain, but Britain they left no longer exists in the same way. The family has moved forward. The institution has adjusted. Catherine's position has strengthened. William's future role has become clearer, and the younger royals are growing into the spaces once occupied by others. So when the Sussexes finally arrive, the most important photograph may not show them walking through an airport at all. It may show who was standing where they once stood and who was no longer waiting for them.